What if the greatest enemy of God was never an atheist, but a physicist with a curious smile and a chalkboard? What if the most dangerous question ever asked wasn't asked in a church or a courtroom or a philosophy classroom, but in a laboratory, quietly, between two equations? Science and religion have been at war for centuries, but this war was never about hatred, it was about honesty. The real conflict was never between good and evil, it was between certainty and curiosity. Religion offers answers, science dares to live with questions. And here's what shocks people. The man we're talking about today didn't hate believers, he pitied them. Not out of arrogance, but out of sadness, because he understood something they didn't, that the universe is far more magnificent than any story told about it, that the stars don't need a narrator, that the flowers don't need a painter, that nature, in all her staggering complexity, is not less beautiful because we understand her. She becomes more beautiful. And the moment you replace that awe with a simple answer, you haven't found God, you've lost the universe. What if believing in God isn't a matter of faith, but of fear? Fear of the unknown, fear of questions without answers, fear of a universe that doesn't care about you personally. The man behind this speech once said something that stopped rooms cold. I can live with doubt and uncertainty and not knowing. That sentence alone dismantles decades of religious comfort, because religion, at its core, promises certainty. It promises that someone is watching, that there's a plan, that your suffering means something. And people need that, desperately. But what if that need, that beautiful, human, heartbreaking need, is precisely what blinds them? What if the comfort of an answer is the greatest obstacle to truth? Science doesn't promise comfort, it promises accuracy. And sometimes accuracy is brutal. Sometimes the answer to, why did this happen to me, is simply physics, molecules, probability, a universe operating without a director. That is terrifying. But it is also liberating, because once you stop waiting for divine permission to understand the world, you start actually understanding it. And that understanding, cold, clear, and devastating, is worth more than 1,000 prayers whispered into silence. What if the single most religious thing a human being can do is doubt? Not blind doubt, not nihilism, but the active, burning, relentless refusal to accept an answer that hasn't been earned. The figure at the center of today's speech was not an angry man. He was a precise man. And precision is the most radical act in a world that rewards performance over truth. He watched people worship. He watched them pray, confess, celebrate, mourn, all within systems handed down to them without a single experiment, without a single test, without a single moment of asking, but how do we know? And that question, how do we know, is the most powerful question in human history. It built medicine, it built bridges, it split atoms, it sent machines beyond the solar system, not because someone prayed for it, because someone refused to stop asking. And here's the shock. Every single religion on earth began with someone who doubted the previous religion. Every prophet was a heretic to someone. So the real question isn't whether you believe in God. The real question is, do you believe in your own ability to question? Because if you don't, you haven't found faith. You've found intellectual surrender. What if God is just a name we gave to the things we didn't understand yet? Lightning, disease, earthquakes, infertility, mental illness, eclipses. All of them, at one point in history, were called acts of God. And then, one by one, science took them back, named them, explained them, cured some of them. And with every explanation, the territory of God shrank. This is known as the God of the gaps. God lives wherever our knowledge doesn't reach, and as knowledge expands, God retreats. Now here's what's truly shocking. This isn't an argument against spirituality. It's an argument against lazy thinking. The man this speech is built around didn't attack God. He attacked the certainty of those who claim to know God personally, intimately, completely. Because the universe is 13.8 billion years old. It contains 2 trillion galaxies. It operates on rules so precise, so elegant, that they can be written in mathematics smaller than a paragraph. And in all of that staggering, incomprehensible, violent, beautiful reality, you think a being chose you, knows your name, counts your sins? The ego required to believe that isn't faith. It's cosmic narcissism. What if the truth is that not knowing is the most honest position a human being can take, and the bravest? We live in a culture that rewards confidence. Preachers who shout the loudest, politicians who never admit doubt, influencers who speak in certainties. And religion fits perfectly into that culture. It offers absolute answers to absolute questions. Life after death? Yes. Purpose of existence? Yes. Why do bad things happen? Yes. And here's the answer. But science, real science, does something radically different. It says, here is what we know, here is how confident we are, here is the margin of error. And that humility, that mathematical structured humility, is not weakness. It is the highest form of intellectual integrity. The physicist this speech celebrates once described the scientific method not as a collection of facts, but as a way of not fooling yourself. And the first person you fool, he warned, is you. Religion at its worst is the architecture of self-deception. Not because God doesn't exist, but because certainty about God, without evidence, without testing, without the willingness to be wrong, is not belief. It is intellectual cowardice dressed in the clothes of virtue. What if the most profound spiritual experience available to a human being isn't prayer, but understanding? Not understanding as in memorizing scripture, understanding as in sitting beneath the night sky and knowing, actually knowing, that the calcium in your bones was forged in a dying star. That you are not separate from the universe. You are the universe, looking at itself. That is not poetry, that is nuclear astrophysics. And it is more awe-inspiring, more humbling, more magnificent than any religious text ever written. Because those texts were written by humans. The universe wrote its own text in the language of mathematics, and it has been waiting billions of years for something intelligent enough to read it. The man behind today's ideas didn't see science as the enemy of wonder. He saw it as the amplifier of wonder. He wept, not in prayer, but in understanding. He felt reverence, not in a church, but in a laboratory. And that's the final, devastating truth. You don't need God to feel small. You don't need religion to feel connected. You just need to actually look at what's there, honestly, bravely, without flinching. The universe is enough. It has always been enough. What if I told you that one of the greatest scientific minds who ever lived, a man who helped unravel the mysteries of quantum electrodynamics, who cracked codes, played bongo drums in Brazil, and once said he could explain anything to a freshman class, or it wasn't really understood at all? What if that man, without a single word of anger, without a raised voice, without a single insult, completely dismantled the philosophical foundation of religious certainty, not by attacking it, but simply by living differently, by asking questions others were too comfortable or too afraid to ask? This speech is not an attack on your faith. It is an invitation to examine it. There is a difference between believing something and understanding it. And that difference is the entire point. When you ask a believer why they believe in God, you will most often receive one of a small number of answers. The universe is too complex to have appeared by accident. Life is too meaningful to be purposeless. Something must have started everything. These are not stupid answers. They are deeply human answers. But they are not examined answers. They are comfortable answers. And comfort, as any honest thinker will tell you, is the enemy of truth. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. Before life existed on Earth, stars were being born and dying in galaxies so far away that their light hasn't reached us yet. Planets formed, collapsed, reformed. Elements were forged in the cores of collapsing giants, and from that violence, that beautiful, indifferent, magnificent violence, came carbon. And from carbon came amino acids. And from amino acids, eventually, improbably, stubbornly, came you. Came consciousness. Came the capacity to ask why. And the first thing consciousness did, understandably, forgivably, humanly, was invent a story to explain it. That story became religion. Now here is where it gets truly shocking. The people who tell this story are not lying. They are not evil. They are not stupid. They are doing what human beings have always done when confronted with something they don't understand. They are reaching for comfort. They are reaching for meaning. They are reaching for a narrator in a universe that appears at first glance to have none. But here is the problem. The map is not the territory. The story is not the truth. And the moment you confuse a story for reality, you have stopped looking. You have closed the door. You have said, I have my answer. I need no more questions. And that is the tragedy. Because the universe does not stop being extraordinary, just because you've decided you know who made it. The double helix does not become less miraculous when you understand the base pairs. The night sky does not become less staggering when you know the stellar life cycle. In fact, and this is the key insight, it becomes more. The more you understand, the more astonishing it becomes. Because complexity, when truly grasped, is not a reason for simplistic explanations. It is a reason for deeper, harder, more relentless questions. Those who believe in God, not spiritually, not poetically, but literally, dogmatically, with the certainty that a personal deity intervenes in human affairs and answers individual prayers, they have, with the greatest of emotional sincerity, stopped thinking. They have traded the extraordinary difficulty of not knowing for the warm, soft comfort of a story, and that trade costs them the universe. They will never know the feeling, the genuine, physical, overwhelming feeling of understanding something truly, deeply, from first principles, without anyone having told them to believe it. They will never experience the specific joy of being wrong and discovering it. They will never sit with a problem for years, decades even, turning it over, failing at it, approaching it from new angles, until one day, one ordinary Tuesday, something clicks, and suddenly the world is different. And you know it's true not because someone told you, not because a book said so, not because a community agrees, but because it fits, because you tested it, because you tried to destroy it and couldn't. That experience, the experience of earned understanding, is the closest thing to the sacred that this life offers. And religion, for all its beauty, for all its music and architecture and community and comfort, takes that away. It hands you the answer before you've understood the question. It fills the silence before you've learned to sit with it. And once you've accepted a handed answer, the real questions become dangerous. Doubt becomes sin. Curiosity becomes arrogance. Questions become betrayal. This is not faith. This is the suppression of the human mind's greatest faculty, its capacity to not know and keep going anyway. The truly brave intellectual position, the one that requires more courage than any act of religious devotion, is to say, I don't know. I may never know, and I will spend my entire life trying to find out. without the guarantee of an answer, without the comfort of a community that already agrees, without the reward of heaven or the fear of hell, just the question and the work, and the astonishing privilege of getting slightly closer to the truth before you die. That is not emptiness. That is the fullest possible human life. The person who understands quantum mechanics, who can follow the mathematics of space-time, who grasps the evolutionary history of consciousness, that person does not need God to feel wonder. They are drowning in wonder. Every molecule is a miracle. Every force is a mystery with a partial answer and 10 new questions. Every day of understanding is a day of being astonished by how much remains. And the person who prays for understanding, instead of studying for it, will die having felt very certain, very comforted, and very wrong. Not because God definitely doesn't exist. That question may be beyond the reach of any instrument we currently have. But because certainty about God, confident, unwavering, unquestioned certainty, is not a spiritual achievement. It is an intellectual failure. It is the mind refusing to do its job. The universe owes us nothing. It did not arrange itself for our comfort. It does not respond to our prayers. It does not make exceptions for our grief. And yet, it is here. We are here. Consciousness is here. The ability to ask why is here. And that is so staggering, so improbable, so breathtaking, that the only appropriate response is not a prayer, it's a question. Always another question. The day a mind like the one we've been channeling today looked at the world honestly, without the filter of inherited certainty, without the safety net of divine explanation, was the day science became not just a method, but a moral act. Because to pursue truth when comfort is available is one of the most courageous things a human being can do. Religion gives answers. Science gives better questions. And better questions, over time, have given us vaccines, telescopes, satellites, surgery, and the knowledge that we are made of stardust, not because a God designed us, but because the universe is so staggeringly abundant that even we became possible. The people who believe in God are not the enemy, but their certainty is. Because certainty closes minds, and the universe is too extraordinary to be understood by a closed mind. Go back to the questions. Live inside the uncertainty. That is where the truth lives.